Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be talking about how it is easy to ease monetary policy. We are finding examples of this taking place right now within the mortgage market. Mortgages are at a 3-year low, if you can believe that, and yet the Federal Reserve hasn't done anything yet. They haven't moved anywhere with their Fed funds rate, which everybody was hoping and praying and wishing and dreaming that the Federal Reserve would do in order to lower the mortgage rates. And here we're finding mortgage rates coming to a 3-year low, even though the Federal Reserve hasn't done anything yet. Now, this is definitely based in the credible threats, and the credible threat theory is very much explaining exactly what is taking place right now. For those of you who have been following me on my channel for any length of time, you have heard me talk extensively about the credible threat theory. It is the theory that I have essentially developed here on this channel, with the commenters contributing in an immense way to come up with the ideas and understandings of what it is that is truly taking place within monetary policy, so that we can appropriately position ourselves to deal with it. Now, most people look to the Federal Reserve to adjust interest rates, and then they say, man, mortgages would be so much cheaper if they would. But yet here we are finding mortgage rates coming down, and the Federal Reserve hasn't moved yet. This is because of the expectations that are coming from the market, from the people who are hoping and believing every single word that is coming from the mainstream media, and they have been told that there is going to be interest rates cuts coming. Because they have heard it, because they have internalized it, they start acting in that way, and here we are, we're finding the mortgages come down. A lot of people will just say, oh no man, you have no idea, this is based off of the 10-year, and I would agree that everything follows the 10-year, the direction that the 10-year goes. 10-year treasury, generally most interest rates can follow. But when people were expecting the Federal Reserve to cut in order to reduce the mortgage rates, it doesn't necessarily need to be the Federal Reserve's actions. In fact, it doesn't need to be their actions at all that does it. We are finding that right now mortgage rates are coming down. Sorry, I got flies all over me here. I'm right along the river here, so we get a lot of, bugs that come in. People are looking at the idea of mortgages coming down, and then they act accordingly for that. Now, when you have the credible threat, the belief system, the expectation that the Federal Reserve is going to be cutting, a lot of people will think it's due to political pressure. Like the Federal Reserve is finally bowing down to Donald Trump and what it is that he's been pressuring. Donald Trump doesn't get anything he wants. You notice that? Like, he doesn't get anything he asked for, nothing. He can't fire Jerome Powell, he can't get rid of Lisa Cook, he can't keep the tariffs in place, he can't get anything he wants, right? And so when I look at what it is that the Trump administration has really done, it's really benefited the Federal Reserve. It's actually done something that eased monetary policy, and the Fed didn't have to do anything at all. You see, the Federal Reserve is following something called the the neutral interest rate. I got to roll up this window, and you wouldn't believe that got like 15 flies going around in here. But the Federal Reserve follows something called the neutral interest rate to know exactly how restrictive their monetary policy is. And now this neutral interest rate is when the Fed is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's when the Federal Reserve is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. There is always going to be restriction or accommodations within the economy for certain people out there. And this is something that I find very interesting about the times that we are now in, is that people will look out there and say, oh man, the high interest rates, it's such a burden. It's such a difficult thing to face. And then when I think about what it is that the Federal Reserve was looking at when it comes to the high interest rates, I think to myself, it came with inflation expectation that raised the neutral interest rate. Raising that neutral interest rate has made the economy far less restricted than anybody had given it any kind of consideration for. And so if you have the economy far less restricted than anybody was giving it consideration for, who is it really benefiting at that time? Right? I mean, is it benefiting the working individual who's having to go out there and bust their butt for a paycheck to try and make that paycheck last them to the end of the month, knowing that there's going to be more month at the end of the paycheck? This is the problem that most people end up facing, but yet there is a group of people out there who do quite well When you have interest rates elevated, people who get a return on their assets that have an interest bearing, right? Interest bearing assets, whether it's through money market accounts that have a better interest rate to them, or if it's an interest rate that they're getting from some other fixed income that is out there. When you have high interest rates, you get a return on capital investment. Well, that benefits those who have that capital investment. Now, if you have a return on your capital investment that's elevated, at the same time, you have an economy that is far less restricted than anybody gives it consideration for. And the people, most of the people, 80% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. Who could have possibly benefited at that time? Right? The top 20% of people. See, to me, this is all working out exactly how I would expect rich people to conduct themselves. High interest rates to get a bigger return on your capital investments in a low restricted environment. Here we are. As the neutral interest rate continues to rise off of your inflation expectations, you got to think about that. That is your inflation expectations pulling that neutral interest rate ever higher. As everybody was out there believing that the Federal Reserve was causing a hyperinflationary scenario, the Federal Reserve was literally giving each other high fives in the background saying, man, we're getting our inflation expectations elevated. We're getting the neutral interest rate up. We are getting our Fed funds rate elevated. This is our ammunition coming back into existence. This is something that they had lost after the great financial crisis. Okay. So now here they are in a position in which all they really have to do is flap their gums. Think about it. The belief of a lowering of interest rates coming into the future has created a lower interest rate environment. The Fed hasn't done anything yet. Now, the credible threat of them doing something is very impactful, and they know that. They know it to the point that they use it in their strategy. Okay? And this is something that I try to bring up quite regularly here on this channel, is the speeches that the Federal Reserve gives. And in these speeches, they have literally given away what it is that they are doing. They have given away the strategy in which that they are using. Think about this. This is coming from Philip Jefferson, right? This is a speech that was given not even that long ago. Let me see. Let me bring it up here. Let me find the date on it real quick, guys. Man, I can't believe how many flies are in this truck. It's just unreal. I'm surprised. They're like even crawling on the screen there. Okay, this is reading between the lines. Textual analysis of central bank communication. Go and read this speech for yourself. February 21st, 2025. This is when he gave the speech, so it wasn't even that long ago. And he says it straight up in there. Using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, and high-frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. Think about that. This is coming from a member of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee. You know, when everybody says, well, Powell's not lowering rates, Powell has one vote on the FOMC. There's 12 other voting members. This happens to be one of them. This is the people who develop monetary policy, and they are straight up saying that they use their words to alter the asset prices. A U.S. Treasury is an asset. When yields go down, prices go up. Specific words and sentences This research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. They made out that announcement that there was going to be lowering interest rates coming into the future. It wasn't really an announcement. He didn't give any kind of real communication of clarity on an interest rate cut. It was a possibility. Looks like the time is coming. Surely it's possible, but there was no defined definition or defined definite cutting of interest rates coming into the future. But the mainstream media narrative would convince you differently. And because of that, we are seeing the mortgage rates start to come down. All right? He goes on to say this: policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term interest rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. Right? Right there. Easing or tightening of financial conditions based on the communications that they are using. And they know that their communications are going to do this. So when I sit there and I think about what it is that the Federal Reserve is going to be doing into the future, when you hear Donald Trump say something about, like, the Fed should be cutting, double cutting, it should take it to zero, all this on and on and on and on and on and on, that's not really the monetary policy tool. See, if you want an easier financial conditions, you just have to convince the people, the markets, the mainstream media narrative, that they will be cutting into the future, and it will create the economic outcome that they are looking for. Easing financial conditions. They don't have to do anything but use the right words. The more we see it, the more we recognize this, the more we can position ourselves accordingly for it. I don't know how many people out there ask me all the time, is the Fed going to cut at this next meeting? And I think to myself, what difference does it really make? Are you looking for easy financial conditions based on a Federal Reserve or the Fed funds rate being cut? Because really the communication that came out just a few weeks ago is creating the environment that you're looking for. The Fed hasn't moved yet. So do you want it to be a Fed funds rate adjustment that is creating the environment that you're looking for? Or do you want to know what's really creating the economic environment that you're looking for? See, our ego wants us to tells us, no, it needs to be the Fed funds rate cutting. That way I know when to act appropriately after the Federal Reserve has made their move. You're going to be lost. You're going to be lost and confused and blaming politics or doing whatever after that, because you will have not positioned yourself accordingly. It will be too late. See, the Federal Reserve had already communicated their monetary policy. Markets incorporated that quickly into asset prices, creating an easing or tightening of financial conditions, and you're still waiting for them to cut. See the difference? See, I try to show this. I tried to explain this for years to people. I've tried to show how it is that the economy is far less restricted than anybody wanted to give it consideration for when you have elevated Fed funds rate. If that neutral interest rate is rising on inflation expectation, who does it benefit the most? Is it going to benefit the working class who's struggling to get their paycheck to make it to the end of the month? Or is it going to benefit those who have return on capital investments that get a higher return for it? And if they are getting a higher return for it, how are they deploying that into the economy, considering that the economy is far less restricted than anybody considered it? Again, this seems so set up to benefit the rich, the people who understand money, understand how to deal with it, and how to position themselves to be in the most beneficial outcome for it. It definitely works for them. Everybody else who's thinking, man, how come I can't go to work and have enough from my day job, earn a living wage from my day job? How come it's a politician's fault for creating this environment? That's what 80% of the people think and do. You see, I mean, to me, when I think about what it is that's really going on there, is I think, okay, the mainstream media narrative has completely screwed up about 80% of the people out there who are begging and hoping and dreaming and wishing that there was going to be something out there that allowed their day job to be enough. And now this media narrative is throwing them little bits and crumbs saying, hey, we got an idea. If there was tariffs, if we could bring manufacturing back, if we had just the right monetary policy, if we had the right administration, and they toss all these little pieces of breadcrumbs out there and people gobble them up saying, yes, please do this for me, because I have no idea on what it is that my day job is going to do to provide me with enough, and I have no idea what it is that I'm going to do for myself. That's literally what most of the people are saying out there. And then 20% of the people who are going out and have deployed some money into the right positions that get a return on their investment are going, man, this is an awesome time. This is the best. If you can't see how Cantillon effect has separated the rich from the poor, if you can't see how new money, ever increasing amounts of new money, is what literally does it, it's because of the luxurious experience that people want to enjoy from all their hard work. All of that combined has created the situation we are now in that the majority of people will blame on politics. The easing of financial conditions is coming from perception that is being delivered through the mainstream media narrative. Okay? Tightening of financial conditions is the same. It comes from the expectations of the people, what it is that they think is going to be happening going into the future, and that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can witness it right now taking place within the mortgage market. 3-year low, and the Fed hasn't moved. How many times have you heard Donald Trump say, the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates too high and making it difficult for people to get mortgages? And I'm thinking, no, they're not. No, they're not. That's not them doing it. It's the delivery of the message that is doing it. Because the adjustment of Fed funds rate is not the important tool. If it was delivered with the message that they are promising to ease into the future, it would lower the mortgage rates. There it is. They don't have to do anything. They just have to convince the people that they are going to. And the more I recognize that, the more I see it, the more I know how to position myself to deal with it. When I think about the easing of financial conditions that nobody is recognizing right now because of the rising neutral interest rate, which is making the economy far less restricted, I think to myself, man, this is going to create a lot of transactions in a particular market once the people recognize what it is that's happening. You start to lower the interest rates, whether it's happening through the Fed funds rate adjustment or just the market perception, there is people who are going to start jumping into the game. They have been sitting on the sidelines waiting to buy a house. And if you make it just slightly easier, then you're going to have people jump. The easier it gets, the more people jump. And right now, it has been such a stagnant market, hardly any transactions taking place. See, the crash wasn't in prices. The crash was in transactions. Just the amount of transactions taking place. It doesn't matter what they were selling for, right? I mean, it does matter, but that wasn't the important part. The important part was that there was none happening. Now, if transactions start to pick up, why? Is because the easing of financial conditions? Is it the easier monetary policy? Is it easing because there's less financial restriction happening within the economy? Are people recognizing that? Not at all. Once you see it, if you follow the Uneducated Economist, took in the credible threat theory as it was being developed over these last few years, all this makes so much more sense. It totally lines up. It's just like, yeah, there's no surprise. People say, oh man, all these manufacturing jobs are going to come back. And I was like, well, you can ignore that. That's not going to happen. There ain't nothing that can happen to bring that back. Our standard of living is far too high to compete. You don't believe it? Just look at the farmers who are now losing their biggest customer, China, for the soybeans. And there is not enough customers out there to fulfill the demand that is going to be needed in order to support these farmers. It's just not going to happen. They could take their soybeans to market, but if you have other countries out there who are producing the same soybeans at a cheaper price with no promised customer like the United States had coming from China, then you have to compete against all the rest of the people out there who are growing soybeans, and most of those people are probably sleeping on the ground. So how do you compete against that? You can't. You can have ever-increasing amounts of subsidies, right? You can have ever-increasing amounts of government intervention until the point that if you didn't have government at all, it would all fail. The moment government gets out of the way, it's gone. It's because it was never supposed to be there in the first place, because the underlying economic forces is forcing the manufacturers out of this country, because we have too high of a standard of living to compete against the rest of the people out there who are producing the same things we are. All the ideas that you can have government intervention to stop that from happening is literally begging to have government involved in your life to the point that you can't get them out. And the moment that they do, you fail. See, understanding that we are in a position now that we can't go back. There ain't no going back to fix it. You can't fix the situation. It's best to understand the situation for what it is so that you can appropriately deal with it. People say, oh man, I don't want to gamble in the stock market. I don't want to get into real estate. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just want to show up to work, get a pension, and go and retire. Well, you might be able to do it. Maybe. I mean, be really, really, really disciplined from a really young age and be very careful on where it is that your pension is, whether it's in 401k or an actual pension from a corporation or something of that nature. And you're very focused in on that, and you know, like hyper focused in on it so that you don't screw that up or somebody else doesn't screw it up, then okay, yeah, sure, you can go to your job, you can work your 9 to 5, you can be very disciplined, do that from the time you're 18 all the way up to 65, and you might be able to get away with that, right? But if you screw any of that up along the way, you're going to have to come up with a new plan, right? A whole new plan. And most people don't have an option like that. Most people don't really start figuring out what they're going to do for their retirement until they're about 15 years away from it, and then they start to panic. Right? Trust me, I know. And this is the unfortunateness that most people sit in. How is it that you fix that? You can't. Understand it for yourself so you can position yourself. That you can do. That you can do. And it will work. I assure you. You can figure out what it is that you need to do. Because if you can become a landlord, if you can become figure out how to hold on to dividend stock portfolio, if you can figure out how to start a business, figure out some sort of education for yourself so you can level up in your income, these are the things that you definitely can do, right? But you can't get a politician to fix it. That you can't do. There's no sign that you can hold out there on the street to show to other people to convince them to vote for the right person. There is no person there to vote for. All right? And this is why I find it so, like, literally everything that I've ever learned about economics, everything I've learned about how it is that how it really works is so counterintuitive to everything that I had ever been told or believed. Once I realized that I cannot listen to anybody else, but I have to do this research for myself, I have to figure this out for myself, it is only at that point that I was actually able to start positioning myself in a way that I thought, man, I can actually make it. You know, time will tell whether I do or not, but at least I feel like I have an opportunity to do it now. Most people don't even feel that. How did we end this? 22 minutes. Man, I really rambled on, didn't I? Okay. The job market is tanking due to things outside of normal market forces. Yeah, but Jeff, I think about that. The unemployment is now still historically low comparatively to where it's been. Now, is there a lot more people not in the workforce, not participating? Is there necessarily an awesome jobs? No, I'm not saying that by any means. What I am saying is by looking at monetary policy and understanding what it is that they are looking at in order to conduct monetary policy, it doesn't matter if they have, unemployment can be essentially any number that it could be. It doesn't matter. What they are looking at is what we have to look at. If we're going to understand monetary policy anyway, in order to position ourselves, people ask me all the time, what's going on with the Fed funds rate? And I think it was that the same person that asked me about whether or not I'm actually looking at the unemployment numbers. Because now they're asking me if the Fed is going to cut. And I'm thinking, why do you care if the Fed cuts? You don't believe the unemployment number to begin with. So why even watch, right? See, I already understood from a long time ago from FASB 56 that it doesn't really matter what the numbers are. They can lie about it. Literally lie to you. Legal lies. For national security reasons, they do not have to give you the real numbers. The numbers they give you are good enough, so they say, right? But now, what the actual numbers are, we don't know. We don't know if the ones they're giving us are real or not. And so if I don't understand the numbers being real or not, then I just don't understand the numbers at all, right? Because they have to be real, because if they could be fake, they're all fake. So FASB 56 has already convinced me that the numbers don't matter. They literally can lie to you for national security reasons. And so with that being the case, I don't look at the numbers for what they are. I look at the direction that they are going and by how much. Because I think that is probably a lot more accurate than people would give any kind of credit for, especially considering that all the numbers could be fake. But the direction that they go and by how much, that might be a little more accurate. Okay? So again, I look to the Federal Reserve to what it is that I think that they are doing with their monetary policy. Generally, that comes from a deployment of information through their words, through mainstream media interviews, through their comments, through all this like attention that is given to them. But the actual monetary policy, right, the cutting of Fed funds rate that people are focused in on, that is too late. By the time that happens, everything has already been priced in. Everybody is already positioned. Man, these flies in here are just crazy. I can't believe how many are in here. Hey, Simon, I've been going crazy about the ballistics question. I have, perhaps you can answer. I know a lot about guns. I know a little bit about guns, but I don't know nothing about ballistics and talking anything about it. I mean, I just know how to shoot a rifle really well. Right. You know, that's the thing about it is like people get all these really fancy and high-tech rifles and all that other stuff. And, you know, to me, it's just like, okay, they're cool, nice hobby or whatever it comes down to. But to me, like I have out of everything, the Ruger 1022 is probably my favorite little rifle. Right? It's not high powered. It's not fancy. Right? It's very accurate. Open sights. If I can see it, I can hit it. Right? And the coolest part about it, a 22, you can carry like 500 rounds in your front pockets. Right? Like, I mean, you can carry a lot of ammunition and it's not that heavy. Most ammunition is heavy. Like, that's the hardest part. Carrying, 500 rounds of just about anything out there would be very burdensome. But 522 long rifles, nothing to it, man. You could pack 1,000 rounds and it wouldn't even be that big of a deal. So to me, like, I think about, utility, usefulness, right? Accessibility, accuracy. Can't beat it, man. Not to mention, it's just like, I don't care how big or tough or anything else you are. If you got 22 shots coming around you, you're going to duck, right? You're not going to poke your head out and tink, 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 tink. And it doesn't that doesn't matter how big of a rifle you get. It's a 22 or 223 or 30-06. If you got bullets coming at you, you're going to duck. All right. Does it matter if the United States buys the treasuries or does foreign entities have to buy it? I think most of the treasuries are owned by Americans, aren't they? All right. Have you ever seen that drum-fed 22 fully auto machine gun? That thing sounds like a swarm of bees. Yeah, I've seen some, but I can't imagine how hot a little 22 barrel must get. I mean, they're just a thin little tube. There ain't much to it, and you start blasting that many rounds through it, man, it can start screwing the barrel up, All right. But we live where you need 300 mag to stop those that think you're food. No, you don't. Okay, so you don't need the 300 mag for that, right? Like 357, snub nose 357, short barrel shotgun with a slug. All right, to me, like a high powered rifle is really good for two things: big game, right, and sniping. So it like in a defensive, on the run position, stuff like that. Like, I'm not like the high powered rifle. Don't get me wrong, I would love to have one in the time of need, but it's not my first choice. Not for fighting, not for defense, not for survival, not for any of that. The high-powered rifle really is not my first choice. In fact, it would probably be my last choice. 300 weighting mag. No, it's not small. You know, I mean, get something really good, like get a 308 Ultra Mag or something like that. You know, it's really gonna blast out there. You know. Have you ever seen such a large entrance wound with no exit wound? No, but I tell you, I shot a gallon of water with a 17 HMR from about 15 feet away. It made a heck of a pop. I tell you, man, I didn't expect. Okay, so this is what happened, right? So I had this 17, I still have it. I have the 17 HMR, right? If anybody's ever seen one of these are like tiny little bullets, right? I mean, it's like a 22 is small. This is even smaller than that. It's like a little speck of a projectile coming out. It's like 17 grains, right? Very tiny little bullet, but it's packed by what is essentially like a neck down 22 mag, right? So it has a lot of powder behind it that's going to send this thing flying pretty quick, right? So I set up this jug, and why in the world that I wanted, like, didn't set it up like, 20 yards away, I don't know, but like it was like in the yard, right? So I just shot it in the yard, and I never had this experience before, but when I sat there and shot it and went poosh, and I was just covered in water, and I'm like sitting there just dripping, and I'm like, what in the hell? Like, I shot that jug of water, that gallon of water, and it was, I had a lid on it, and literally, like, it hit the front of the thing, and all the water came right back through the same hole, right? And it just doused me, and I mean, it just, like, all of it just sprayed, and I thought, holy moly, I was not expecting that, right? Those things act and will hit and explode stuff like you wouldn't believe. Like, you hit a chunk of fruit, it doesn't seem like you hit a watermelon. Like, it goes in pretty small, like you can hardly even see where it goes in, and then it doesn't really leave like a huge outside wound to it. But that jug of water at that close range, like, literally popped. Like, yeah. It's weird. That's cool. All right. Personally, don't know what exactly you're saying, but large in a unusual large out. Do you believe, Charlie? I'm not going into there. Do you think the neutral rate will be much higher than the target inflation rate? And do you think we are closer to it than people want to believe? Maybe the Fed says tomorrow they're not cutting more. I think that would be a really shocking shock and awe event to not cut to, at the meeting, right? Only because people have priced it in. If you all of a sudden remove that, you're going to see a bunch of unwinding doom, right? Because everybody is, like, essentially positioned themselves for a rate cut. However, what I don't think a lot of people are anticipating or thinking or expecting or listening for is the message that comes with it, because that's going to have a profound impact on the economy going forward. So you remember last time they cut interest rates, mortgage rates went up, like they were dropping all the way up until the Fed cut rates, and then they shot up. The mortgage rates did exactly the opposite of the Federal Reserve's, because they delivered it with a message that says, hey, we got hard times coming. We got issues. We got unemployment. We got all this stuff that's, we're trying to support the labor market, and all this stuff that they were talking that feared everybody out. And then what'd you see happen, right? Mortgage rates started to go up. Now, we don't have that same thing. I mean, they're saying, oh, well, we have to support the labor market, but we got this inflationary. But the labor market really ain't that bad. Unemployment is down, especially when you look at the Fed's numbers. So to me, they're probably not going to deliver a scary statement. It's going to be one of support, right? So in that sense, it will most likely ease financial conditions going into the future. I'm assuming that. I don't know what the message is going to be. Once they do it and once we hear it, we'll have a better understanding of what it is that they have said and what we can expect coming from the future of the market's expectations that are going to be bleeding into the market after that, right? I mean, like, literally, their words are going to have the most profound impact once they deliver that message. So we have to wait for that message to be delivered. Up at this point, I think it's going to ease conditions. Now, going to the neutral interest rate, if the neutral interest rate, I mean, they assume that it's 100 basis points from where we are today, they would have to lower the rates by a whole percentage point in order to get to neutral. Now, if they lower interest rates by a quarter point and then over the course of the rest of the year, we have ever increasing amounts of inflation expectation that is being persistent into the mainstream media, most likely that will continue to raise the neutral interest rate. And it will continue to make the economy far less restricted. So again, like, we have to wait and see what's going to come. If the inflationary expectation falls, if the tariffs get removed, if all the problems that we were facing all of a sudden just starts to vanish because Trump doesn't get his way for anything, right? And if Trump doesn't get his way on all this stuff and it starts to just fade away, and the Federal Reserve doesn't get taken over by Trump, and the tariffs aren't as bad as everybody says that they were going to be, and all that other stuff just starts to be removed, what do you think is going to happen to financial conditions if that was to take place? Right? I mean, I know it's a huge what if, but what if? So here you have easier financial conditions, right? The Fed funds rate is coming down. The idea of tariffs getting removed, all that other stuff goes away. Most likely, the inflation expectation would start to diminish. And if that was to be consistent and persistent going into the future, it would start to pull the neutral interest rate down again. Right? And in that case, the Fed would essentially have to chase it down. Like, if the neutral interest rate starts to fall, then the Fed would start to fall with it, neither making the economy more or less restricted, just kind of keeping pace with it on the way down. That's huge what if. Until we get there, we don't know. And so at this point, what I see, elevated inflation expectation raises the neutral interest rate. This elevated inflation expectation is based off of tariffs. Tariffs may not even be legal, right? So until we get past that, we're probably going to find the neutral interest rate rising. How much? Probably not that much farther from where it is, right? Unless something very profound happens that really gets the inflation expectation elevated. But if it's to be maintained at this level, then most likely you're not going to see much more rising of the neutral interest rate. And if it does, it's probably not going to pass the Fed funds rate. I just don't think that would take place. Could it? Yeah, sure. But I don't think that's going to happen, right? Unless, again, something very profound changes the expectations of the inflationary scenario. All right. Why does anybody know anything about ballistics? Is there a nurse or a doctor watching? Okay. Hold longs, put in hedges, liquidate where tax sheltered, heavier cash, municipal. Is that What is that? Money market? Bonds? Some gold? Alright, let's see here. Are you working on a conspiracy theory deplorable? Hey, Jack. Alright, the one vid I saw, it did look like he did suffer. Is that why you guys were talking about the ballistics? Alright, just talking about you in a good way. Do you know what ballistics mean? I do reload and have limited ballistics knowledge. Yeah, grain, distance, weight, wind speed, powder. Alright. Yeah, all that stuff. There's guys around here who took a lot of, there's a lot of people around here who do reloading, but it's like, the times of like being able to just kind of be open and free with your firearms, like what I mean is like being relaxed, essentially not relaxed in the sense of safety, but just relaxed in the company that you would talk about them or handle them or be around with them and stuff like that. It's changed so much over since I was a kid. Like, I remember when I was a kid, we could, people would still take their rifles to school they were deer hunting before or after school. It wasn't even really thought about as being a big deal. Lots of people drove around with rifles in their back windows. In like the back of the pickup truck, in the back window, they would have the rifle racks. And that was really common. Like everybody had them. And even I remember being like 16, taking my shotgun to school to go goose hunting after school, and nobody, like, I mean, we didn't have to, like, nobody cared. I mean, it was just like, I remember that being the thing. And like, I don't think I told the school. I don't think anybody cared. I didn't even think that was a thing to tell anybody. Like, it was like no big deal. And nowadays, I mean, man, you couldn't even, like, that's such a far off concept now to take a firearm to school, especially as a student or something like that. It would be like one of the most scariest events taking place, and I'm thinking, man, that was such a normal thing when I was a kid, And I mean, I'm not even 50 years old. I'm only 49 years old, so it wasn't even that long ago, really, you think about it. We have state rights for a reason. You can use Google and it will tell you what effect you are looking for. Portable, most things I heard he was wearing. Oh, you guys are still talking about that stuff. Alright, conceal would be better for retention. Heck yeah, relax. We all carry if we want to cross state lines. Yeah. Why do you always put your fussy dice back up all the time? Oh yeah, where are those things? Because you can't drive with something obscure, and I don't want to get pulled over for it, right? See, you can get pulled over for blocking view, And so I have to take them down if I'm driving. And that was just 40-ish years ago. Okay, there is a state that just passed some legislation to command firearms into schools for the protection. Yeah. Would you trust an economist that doesn't have fuzzy dice? Yeah, that's a good question, right? I know I wouldn't. Thanks, Jeff. Alright, calling 6 on the dice. Yeah. See, that's just the thing. Like, when it comes to concealed carry and all that, like, to be honest, I wish more people would do it. Like, I feel way better knowing that the people that I'm around are actually packing, holding that. Like, I feel much better about that than if we were in a situation in which that there was nobody holding. So knowing that that there's people around me that are concealed carry, that gives me a sense of ease, right? Like, I wish more people would do that. I personally have made a choice not to get a concealed weapons permit, but then again, I don't want to carry firearms, right? When I do carry, it's usually in an appropriate timing, like I'm out in the woods, right? And open carry firearms is no big deal. It's totally expected, and nobody's going to even second guess it why you're doing it, right? It's just a very normal thing to do. But, I'm out here on the mean streets of Astoria. I don't need a firearm. All right, there's no threat. There's not even a credible threat here. It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's the possibility anywhere you go that's gonna happen, but this is a really safe community. And if I was ever in a position in which that I felt that I needed to do that on a regular basis, I wouldn't feel comfortable being in that area anymore, and I'd probably find a new place to be. So that's just me personally, but understanding and knowing that the people around me could be and probably are, I'm totally cool with it. In fact, it makes me feel much better, Alright. An armed society is a polite society. That's not just a bumper sticker logic. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I wouldn't trust an economist if he didn't have hair on his... What? Oh, you're talking about these? Like the fuzzy dice? Alright. My personally never carried or cared. Yeah, me personally never carried, never cared. Yeah, well, I just never was in an area that I felt like the need to do it, you know? And it's funny because I see people open carry in Astoria, and I think to myself, if you're going to do that, which is cool, I don't care, but you might want to know the law, right? Because City Ordinance 5.010 clearly dictates that the open carry of a loaded firearm is illegal. You can't do that. You can carry the firearm. There's nothing that they can do to stop you from doing that. Like, that's a constitutional right that they cannot create a law that prevents you from doing. Like, constitutional rights supersede any ordinances or statutes. But the problem with it is most people think, well, if I can carry a firearm because it's a constitutional right, then I can do it in any manner I want. And that part is not right. That part is not true. They have determined that they can tell you you cannot carry a loaded firearm. City Ordinance 5.010 says that, and many city ordinances and statutes say something very similar to that, but they can't stop you from carrying the firearm itself. In fact, even if they were to stop you, you don't have to identify yourself. Now, this isn't legal advice, this is just the way it is, but you don't have to identify yourself, but you do have to prove that the firearm is not loaded. Once that proof has been determined, you're free to go with your firearm and no need to give up your identification or none of that stuff. Knowing how to conduct yourself in that sort of situation is very difficult because most cops are going to intimidate the shit out of you until you give up your license. Right? Now, if you're in a position in which that you are trying to hold your own against the police officer with an unloaded firearm so that you can exercise your rights, I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing? Like, is that something that's fun to do? All right, my wife's done. She's done with her appointment. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. I enjoyed this talk. I don't know why we went into all the firearm stuff and all that other things, but I guess it was a good topic, and occasionally that's something to, to bring up and talk about. But really, I wanted to talk about the easing of financial conditions due to the credible threats of the Fed's monetary policy adjustment that is coming into the future that hasn't happened yet, but the proof of the credible threat in the job owning and the forward guidance and the signaling and all that is proving itself when you see the mortgage rates come down to a 3-year low, even before the Fed moves. So again, I try to share this with you as soon as I can, as soon as I see it, as much as I can. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.